Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Debbie, and I'm back with more True Crimes of Criminal Minds. Welcome to my channel. If you've never been here before, what I do is I take an episode of the TV show Criminal Minds, and then I talk about a true crime case that is similar or is mentioned in the episode, or that the episode was actually based on. And to my returning viewers, thank you guys for coming back again and again. I love y'all. Today is a weird one, y'all. This one is nuts. The name of the episode that I am covering today is called Fear and Loathing. It is the 16th episode of season 2, and it's about a man that is telling young women that he's a music producer and he will cut a demo for them for free. Then he gives them a bottle of water, and the water's drugged. And then after they're drugged, he SAs them and ends their life. This week, I'm going to tell you about the murder of Kristi Johnson. Unfortunately, she had to die for this serial predator to be stopped. This is her story. Kristi Johnson was born Christine Louise Johnson on February 23, 1981 in Los Gatos, California. Her parents were Terry Hall and Kirk Johnson, and they lived in South America at the time. But her mom, Terry, her previous delivery of their son, Derek, had been hard and had complications. So Terry went back to California to have Kristi, where it would be safer to have a baby. And her parents lived there too. So after she got out of the hospital, she stayed with her parents for a little while. And then Kristi, at just 6 weeks old, got her first passport so that they could go back to South America to be with her dad and Derek. When Kristi was just a little over a year old, they moved back to California. Kristi loved it there. She sailed and surfed and loved the warm weather and the beaches. Kristi's dad got a great job opportunity, so he moved the family to Holland, Michigan. It was a summer tourist area on Lake Michigan. Kristi worked summer jobs at ice cream parlors and other places frequented by summer beachgoers. Kristi's parents divorced. I'm not sure how old she was at the time. I couldn't find a year. But her mom moved her and her brother Derek to nearby Saugatuck, Michigan. Kristi was always upbeat with a cheerful smile. She was active in drama club and sports at Saugatuck High School, which she graduated from in 1999. After graduation, she attended Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. She got a job as an administrative assistant at the company that her dad worked for. She hated the cold, bitter winters in Michigan. So when she was 19, she decided to move back to California. She did go to California during her summer. She would go stay with her grandparents. So she loved California and wasn't crazy about Michigan. She enrolled at a community college with the intent to transfer to California Polytechnic College to study engineering. Her dream at that time had not been to be an actress, but just to get away from the bitter winters of Michigan. She was living with her grandma and going to college, but she was also looking for work, and she got a job as a production assistant for a movie called Murder by Numbers, starring Sandra Bullock. It's a very good movie. I haven't seen it in a long time, but it was very good. It was being made in San Luis Obispo, which is about 40 minutes from where she lived at the time. LA was 3 hours south. She did not go to California because she wanted to be a starlet or whatever. She just didn't like the winters in Michigan and wanted to go back to the beach. Kristi liked the behind-the-scenes part of productions, and she decided that she wanted to be a makeup artist. So she started taking makeup classes, and she moved to West Hollywood. Kristi met a man named Todd, and they started dating. And then eventually, They moved in together to save money, so they would only have one rent bill. They had a pretty toxic relationship. There was verbal fighting as well as some DV. Now, her mom knew about this. When the police questioned Todd, he said one time that she had started a fight, a physical fight, and he pushed her. But according to Kristi's mom, it was worse than that. So Kristi finally decided she was going to leave Todd, and she moved back in with her grandmother. Not long after that, Todd moved to Santa Maria, where Kristi lived with her grandmother. Kristi's dad would wire her money if she needed it, and she shared a bank account with her mother. Her mom bought her a Mazda Miata and paid for her cell phone so they could always keep in touch. Shortly after Kristi moved back to California, so did her mother. They were best friends and they talked on the phone every day. Kristi worked for a cell phone company doing data entry. She had to drive about 45 minutes to work and back. So her mom helped her find an affordable apartment. It was in Santa Monica, and she would have 2 roommates. Kristi worked all day and took night classes at Santa Monica College 2 nights a week with the intent to transfer to UCLA. That was December of 2002. She realized that her dreams of working in Hollywood were just not working out. Her dad even tried to get her to move back home to Michigan, but Kristi wanted to stay in Santa Monica. The weekend of Valentine's Day, 2003, she decided to go to the mall and window shop to cheer herself up. Before she left, she talked to her mom on the phone, and her mom told her to get whatever she wanted, and it would be an early birthday/Valentine's Day present. While Kristi was in the mall, she was approached by a man who told her how attractive she was. Then he told her that he was the director of photography for a new James Bond film that was in pre-production. He told her that he usually wasn't involved in casting, but she had the look that they wanted, and he would love for her to audition. He asked her if she had a passport because the filming would take place in another country. He also told her that they were only a week away from start of filming, and they still had not found the right person to be the new Bond girl. Kristi was interested. The man told her that she could make $100,000 or more. He told her to wear a black miniskirt, the shorter the better, a button-down white shirt with long sleeves, nylons, and stiletto heels. The higher the better. He would provide the tie. He gave her directions to the house where the audition was to take place. He told her to turn right at the Castle House onto Skyline Drive and told her to be there at 5:30 p.m. This was the last day that Kristi was seen alive. When her mom, Terry, didn't hear from her on Sunday, she was a little worried, so she called her. Her phone went straight to voicemail. And she thought her phone had just died because she knew it wasn't out of service because she paid for it. So it was a holiday weekend, and Monday most people didn't have work or school. But at Kristi's job, she still had to go to work on Monday. And her mother remembered her saying that. So she called her on Monday thinking she'd definitely get her at work. So she called her direct line. And there was no answer. So she called the main number of the business and talked to Kristi's boss, who told her that Kristi never showed up for work that day. And she'd worked there for 3 months and never missed work, had been late twice, and both times called in to tell them that she was going to be late. So this was not like Kristi at all. So everybody's worried about her work, her roommates, her mom. Now, Terry is worried, so she calls Kristi's dad. And he said if she's still missing the next day, he would fly out there. Terry called the police, but since it had only been about 48 hours, they were not willing to do a missing persons report. She was 21 years old and had gone out for the holiday weekend, and her roommates didn't know her well enough, really, to know if this was normal for her or not, because she hadn't lived with them very long, and they thought, they knew she was going to the rave, and they thought, well, maybe she just hooked up with someone at the rave, and maybe she met Mr. Right. They spent the night together, whatever. So they weren't totally worried, but the fact that her mom was freaking out a little bit bothered them. The police told Terry to call the hospitals and any place that she might possibly be. When she called the hospital, there was no Jane Doe's fitting her description. She called Kristi's ex-boyfriend, as well as her roommates and her friend Lucas. She also checked for activity on Kristi's debit card. Remember, they shared a checking account. So Terry had just as much access to it as Kristi did. And she checked her cell phone account that she paid for to see if she had made any phone calls. And the very last phone call she made was to 411, trying to get directions to the house she was supposed to audition at. Now, Terry went to the police and told them what she had done. She checked everywhere. There was still no sign of her. So they finally started a missing persons report. And her dad, Kirk, flew out to California. And together they put up missing persons flyers everywhere, especially at her apartment building, hoping that someone had seen something, as well as putting it on the internet that she was missing. The police talked to her roommate, Carrie, who said that Kristi had come home from the mall, said she had an audition to go to, showered and did her hair and makeup and left again. She also had plans to attend a rave that night. When she was in college in Michigan, she loved the rave scene. I don't know anything about raves. I've never been to one. I don't know. I don't even know if they existed when I was party age. I'm way past party age now, y'all. But when she was in college in Michigan, she loved it. And from what I understand, event coordinators will put up flyers or internet posts about raves with a phone number to call to get tickets. So then when a person calls, they're told that it's sold out, but they'll be put on a waiting list and called if a ticket becomes available. And then they wait a little while and they call or email the interested person back. In this case, with Kristi, it was email. She emailed the event coordinator. So then when they return the email or the phone call or whatever, they increase the price of the tickets. They're like, oh, we have a ticket now, but you're going to have to pay a little more for it. So Kristi had bought a ticket and RSVP'd, and she was planning on going after her audition was over. The media was alerted, and the police started a tip line. The tip line received a call from a woman that said she had been approached in the same mall where Kristi was last seen. That was just the prior month, on January 24th. She was meeting a friend for dinner at a restaurant in the mall. She went to the mall early and was shopping when a man approached her, complimenting her on her looks. He said his name was Victor Thomas, and he was a director of photography for Silver Screen Productions, which was partnered with Disney. He told her that she was perfect for a part in the new James Bond film that was about to go into production. Susan was interested, especially when he told her that she could make upwards of $100,000. He told her to wear a black miniskirt, nylons, white button-down shirt, and stiletto heels. They went to the food court to grab a drink and talk about the audition. He told her that it was very confidential, so she shouldn't tell anyone about it. She decided to meet with him the next day, but she was not quite sure that this guy was on the up and up. She took her boyfriend, Mark, who was a former policeman in London. She didn't want to be in that outfit standing on the street waiting for the guy, which I don't blame her. She put the clothes in a bag and was going to change when she got to the audition. Mark drove her to the address on La Cienega as they had planned, and he stayed out of sight, and he would only interfere if it seemed like something wasn't right. She said that it was strange because Victor just kind of appeared out of nowhere next to her. She was expecting a car to drive up. She didn't see a car drive up. She didn't see him walk up. She just like turned her head and he was there. And then when he got there, he was mad because she wasn't wearing what he asked her to wear. He tried to get her to go with him somewhere so she could change, but she refused. He told her that they had to go meet his business partner, Felicia. This was the first time he'd said anything about a partner. She told him she wasn't going anywhere with him until he showed her some ID. He said that he left his wallet at home and acted insulted that she would ask for ID. She started backing away from him, and he got angry and told her that she wasn't right for the part anyway. Then he ran off. So Mark was watching all of this from the car. He got out and ran toward Victor and Susan, but Victor ran away. So Susan and Mark jumped in the car and found him hiding behind some bushes. He ran again, and Mark was finally able to catch him. He had told Susan that he didn't have any ID on him, so Mark patted him down, and he was not lying about not having ID. He really didn't have ID on him, and Victor started to cry. Mark asked him who he worked for, and he still insisted that he worked for Disney. And Mark asked Victor for a phone number, and he provided one. And Mark was going to call the number to confirm that that was his number, but then he realized he left his cell phone in the car. So he went back to get his cell phone, but he still had a hold of Victor. But Victor was able to break away from him and run across La Cienega Boulevard right into traffic, and he got away. Susan called the police the next day, but while on hold, she changed her mind. Instead, she called the Screen Actors Guild, which she was a member of because she had a small part in one movie, to find out if there was a James Bond film in production. There was not a James Bond film in production. Are y'all shocked? I know, right? The police talked to Kristi's roommate again to see if she knew where Kristi was going that day. She said that she came home from the mall, told her that she had an audition, and showed her the outfit that she bought. It was a white shirt, black miniskirt, nylons, and stiletto heels. And she had trouble walking on the heels. If she had had to walk any distance in the heels, that they would have made blisters on her feet. The exact same outfit that Susan was told to wear. She didn't know where the audition was taking place, though. After that, she told them she was going to a rave. The outfit was the cops' holdback. That information was not given to the media. It wasn't online. It wasn't in any newspaper reports. It was nothing. They kept that back. So they had a really strong lead now because of the identical clothing. The police questioned her ex-boyfriend, Todd, and he had a legit alibi. He was out of town dirt biking with friends. Then they talked to her friend and neighbor, Lucas. Now, Lucas was, according to her mom, was a very attractive guy that liked Kristi, and he wanted her to go on a trip to Hawaii with him, but they were just friends and nothing ever came of it. So Terry liked this kid. So she called to talk to him, and he said that he had seen her on Saturday and that she was really excited about going to an audition. And then they also talked to a friend of hers that she knew from going to raves. And he said that she didn't do drugs and drank very little. She was just there to dance. The police went to where the rave had been, and Kristi's name was on the VIP list, but it wasn't crossed off, indicating that she never showed up. There were other women before Susan and Kristi. In 1989, Christine Klugian was approached by a man telling her how beautiful she was. He said he worked for Columbia Records and there was an industry party and asked her to be his date. The party was in a suite at an expensive hotel and a lot of celebrities would be there. Maybe Madonna even. He would go pick her up in a limo and they would go to dinner first. The next evening, John Maroney was the name that Victor gave her, picked her up in a regular car, not a limo. So this sent up a little red flag, but she decided to let him explain. And he said there had just been a mix-up, that was all. And he couldn't get the limo, so they were going to have to just go in the car. So she got in the car and she went with him. He didn't take her to dinner. He took her to a club in the Center City Mall. And then she finally asked him, when does the party start? When are we going to the party? And he's like, oh, well, come on, let's go now. He took her to the 35-story Bonaventure Hotel, which is a pretty iconic hotel in Hollywood from what I understand. The movie True Lies was filmed there along with others. So it's a pretty swanky hotel. So I would be thinking everything was legit going to that kind of a hotel. But when they got off the elevator, it was deadly quiet. There was nobody inside. It didn't sound like there was a big party there like he had said there was. So he led her to a hotel room that was empty, that he had already registered to. He threw her on the bed and started groping her, trying to get her pantyhose off. And then he brought out a rope that he had put behind the bed and attempted to tie her down. And then he growled at her, I only wanted you for sex. She was able to get away from him and hid in the bathroom, but he broke in and dragged her back to the bed. Why hide in the bathroom? Go out the door. She was able to break free a couple of times, but then he put her in a chokehold. He threw her face down on the bed, ripped a belt off of her dress, and continued trying to tie her up. She was not going to be tied up, and she fought and fought and fought. Then he tried to tie her hands behind her back with his tie. She broke free and ran out of the room. A guest down the hall heard her screams and looked out to see what was happening. He saw her disheveled and ripped clothing and let her into his room to call the police. Guests had reported screams to a hotel security guard who went to see what was going on. John Maroney got away, but the police were able to find out his real identity. Victor Paleogulus. He was arrested for credit card fraud, false imprisonment, and forcible sexual penetration. I guess he used a stolen credit card to pay for the hotel room. At his trial, he said that Christine was lying, that she had been a willing participant. He said there was like a little scuffle at one point, but it wasn't a real fight, that she was a willing participant and that he did not do anything that was against her will. The jury couldn't come to a decision. Instead of going through another trial, he was able to take a plea deal. Now, this scumbag had a knack for getting out of jail time. Victor's boss wrote a letter to the judge telling the judge what a great employee Victor was, and he couldn't do jail time as a felon because he would lose his job, because their company had a policy that you couldn't have a felony on your record. So he asked the judge to please lower the charge to a misdemeanor so he wouldn't have to fire Victor. So Victor was placed on 3 years probation for kidnapping. Well, false imprisonment. To me, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. In my head, it's the same thing. Maybe legally it's not, but in my head it is. Later, they found out that the letter wasn't even from his boss. It was forged. He forged the letter himself. And still, 3 years probation. I don't know what legally happens when they find out that something you submitted to court was forged. That's got to be a crime in itself, right? But this guy was bulletproof when it came to jail time. Victor met Elizabeth Busini at the airport in 1991. He used the James Bond ruse with her, and they went to get a drink and talk about the audition. They were sitting at the bar. They'd ordered their drinks. She looked away briefly, and then when she looked back, she saw powder floating in her drink. So this lady was a smart cookie. She excused herself, went to the bathroom, and she called the restaurant on her cell phone from the bathroom. And she told them that the man at the bar that she was sitting with had just put something in her drink. So she wanted them to call the police, and then she was going to come out and act normal so that he would just stay until the police got there. And she asked him what he put in her drink, and he told her it was sugar. Which sugar does not look like a powder when you put it in a liquid. It doesn't float. It goes down. But anyway, she told him it was sugar, and she told him that she didn't like sugar, and she asked him to switch drinks. Well, he refused, and she continued to insist that they switch drinks. So then he knew that she was onto him, and he got up and he ran out of the bar. While still on probation for the false imprisonment of Kristi Johnson, he moved to Marina del Rey. There was a beautiful woman that he often saw around the neighborhood, and he asked her out. After about 6 months, she wanted out. So he told her that he was dying from a blood clot in his brain, which he then changed his story and elevated it to a brain tumor. And he told her that his dying wish was to buy a restaurant. He gave her an address on San Vicente Boulevard, and he would meet her there at a restaurant he was interested in buying. She went to see him, and when she decided to leave, he jumped up. She said she thought that he was going to just give her a, like a goodbye hug. But instead, he picked her up and took her to the bathroom, and he held her up against the wall with one hand around her throat and tried to rip her clothes off and essay her. She was able to break free and run out into the empty restaurant. Right as she was running into the restaurant, a handyman was coming in, and Victor freaked out. He was like, no, don't come in now, don't come in now. And in the confusion, she was able to get out of the restaurant and into her car. Victor ran after her, crying, saying he was so sorry, he would never do anything to hurt her. And she decided not to report it to the police. Okay, soapbox for a minute. You know how I love my soapboxes, guys. Never, ever feel sorry for a predator. They will never change. And if anything like this happens to you, always go to the police, no matter how embarrassing it might be, because going to the police could prevent the same thing from happening to another woman. If you see something, say something. If these two women had gone to the police, maybe he wouldn't have ever had the opportunity to lure Kristi into the Hollywood Hills. And Kristi would still be alive today. So, okay, off soapbox now. About a month later, she was alone in her house when she heard a noise. She had bought pepper spray after the last attack, so she armed herself with it and went to investigate. The wall of her guest room was mirrored, which I think is kind of strange. But in this case, it was a very good thing because Victor, so you have the wall of mirror, and then you have the bed, and Victor's in between the two. So she, walking in the door at an angle, could see in the mirror that he was hiding behind the bed. So he realized he'd been seen, and he jumped up and he ran toward her, and she ran and hid in her bathroom. Again, with the bathroom, don't hide in the bathroom. But then he broke in, so she pepper sprayed him, and she ran to a neighbor's house to call police. Before he left, he stole a gun and some jewelry. It took the police more than a month to catch him. They spotted an SUV that was reported stolen at a bed and breakfast where he was staying. They went up to the room, and Victor hid in the bathroom. Again, hiding in the bathroom, only this time there was a skylight in the bathroom. So Victor told the police that he had a gun and he was going to use it on himself if they came in. So they decided to wait for the SWAT team. While they were waiting for the SWAT team, Victor was able to open a skylight in the bathroom and get on the roof. He crawled the length of the building and jumped 8 feet to the ground, where he went into a trailer park. And the first trailer he came to that was unlocked, he just opened the door and let himself in. There was only a young boy at home. Now, everything I read said young boy. I don't know the age of this boy, but I'm pretty certain it's not a little kid, because you wouldn't leave a little kid at home by themselves. So I'm thinking like preteen, teenager age boy, but I don't really know. So the boy happened to be watching the news, so he knew exactly what was happening, and he knew that the cops were coming to the trailer park, and some of them were already, and so he was able to run outside and tell the cops, that dude is in my house. And of course, Victor denied breaking in. He said that he knocked on the door and asked the boy to let him use the phone, and he gave him $20 to use the phone. He faced charges of first-degree residential burglary, grand theft, false imprisonment by violence, and stalking. He posted bail. Anybody that's a danger to the community should not get bail. I hope some people learned a lesson from this case. I really do. Because there's so many times that this could have been stopped, but it didn't. He just kept getting lucky. His lawyer was able to get all the charges dismissed except for the first-degree burglary. The judge gave Victor a 6-year suspended sentence with probation. Again, no jail times. He had slipped through the cracks in the justice system once again. Sometime in late 98, early 99, Victor was back to hunting in the Century Center Mall. There he saw Kathy DeBuono. Kathy was already an actress. She played a Dabo girl in Quark's bar on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. He approached her and told her that he was a producer at Disney and she was perfect for the new James Bond film that they were working on. So Kathy, and this was my first thought too because I'm a huge Disney fan, Kathy, knowing the entertainment business, thought that was suspicious because she knew that Disney did not make James Bond films. And that was what I said when I first started researching this and read that. I was like, dude, do your research. If you're going to use a ruse, do it right. Which I probably shouldn't be encouraging that. But anyway. So Victor gave her a business card with the name Brian. And it was a Disney executive's business card. So because she was already an actress and she already had an agent, she tried to get Brian to call her agent and go through it that way. And he said he didn't want to go through an agent. This way she would make more money because the agent wouldn't get a cut. So still suspicious, she went ahead and set up the meeting for the audition, but she told her agent about it. Brian wouldn't give her his business card because it was his last one, and she said it was really beat up, looked like it had been used and handled a lot. And Kathy wrote down all the info on the card, and she gave her agent the phone number from the card, and he called, and it was a real Disney exec named Brian, but it was not the man from the mall. And he advised the agent to tell their client not to go to the audition. But out of curiosity, Kathy went anyway. But she took one of the Star Trek stuntmen with her, and he hid in the backseat of her car. But Brian never showed up. I think he figured out from her wanting to go through an agent and everything that he had screwed up by picking her. His next target was a woman named Heather Mayer. Victor met her in 1998 outside the Sky Bar in West Hollywood. He used the same story as always to Heather and a friend that she was with. And he told them to meet him at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel at 8:30 a.m. and to come alone because it was a closed audition. Heather met him the next morning to go over the paperwork. The papers looked legit and she was excited. Then he told her that the audition wasn't there and he wanted to drive her to the audition, but she refused, insisting that she take her own car. So she followed him to an address on San Vicente Boulevard. It was an empty restaurant. She said it was dark. There were only 3 chairs set out in the middle of the room, no tables, and it had stacks of chairs in the corner. She asked to use the restroom, and he told her where it was, and she said there's no electricity. She tried to turn on the light, nothing. And strangely, she came out still believing that it was a legit audition, and he told her that he wanted to go through the poses for the promotional material before his partner got there. So Victor told her to sit on the floor with her ankles crossed closely together, and then he took out a strap with a buckle on it so that it could be cinched tightly, and he got it around her ankles and pulled it tight. She protested that it hurt, and she tried to take it off. That's when he slammed her body flat to the floor. She kept struggling, and he flipped her over, and with one hand on her, she said she heard his belt come off and his zipper go down. Then he took off his tie and tried to strangle her with it, but she was able to slip her hand between the tie and her neck so that he couldn't choke her. I don't know, though. If you're really strong, that could break your hand and then choke you. I don't know. What do you guys think? Anyway, it worked for her. She was able to break free and ran for the door. They fought at the door, but she took off her stiletto heel and she brandished it like a weapon. And I've always said, you could kill a person with a stiletto heel. You absolutely could. So he was afraid, and she was able to duck out under his arm and run to safety. And she was very grateful that she had driven her own car. So she jumped in her car, drove away, and when she felt like she was far enough away and she was safe, she called the police. They arrested Victor, but he posted bail. Again, they let him post bail. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge again and was given a 2-year sentence for felony battery. Finally, they got him behind bars. Finally. And he was on probation with that 6-year suspended sentence for burglary. I don't know how you get more years for burglary than you do for false imprisonment and SA, but it is what it is, I guess. So, because of that 6-year suspended sentence, and he violated his parole, he had to serve the 2 years and the 6 years. But he wasn't in prison for 8 years. Oh, no. He was in prison for 3 years and 5 months. He was paroled on January 20th, 2003, just days before he approached Susan at the mall on January 24th. Then the police found Kristi's car, a white convertible Mazda Miata. Security personnel for the parking garage that was shared by 2 upscale Century City hotels, the Century Plaza and the St. Regis, had performed a routine check of vehicles left in place too long and noticed the white Mazda. Now, the reason why the Mazda stood out was because most of the cars in the garages were Lamborghinis, Porsches, Mercedes, really, really expensive cars. It stood out as being out of place. And it wasn't driven by Kristi. It was driven by a man, and that man was all by himself. And the attendant said, "No, wait, guy, you can't park here. This is valet parking only." And then the man got angry, threw the keys at the attendant, and said, "Then valet it," and walked away. This happened around 5:45 a.m. in the morning after Kristi disappeared. So they erected the yellow police tape around the car, and CSI was called to look for fingerprints, DNA, trash that could maybe be a lead, hairs, fibers, all that kind of stuff that they look for in cars. They found a water bottle and her cell phone, but no foreign DNA or fingerprints were found. The police still had tips coming in. There were more women, 7 or 8 in total. Susan had sat down with a sketch artist and did a composite sketch. This was now added to the media coverage. So then the police get a call from a parole officer that recognizes the sketch as one of her parolees, Victor Paleogulus. They also had a call from a real estate agent named Paul Katie. He recognized the sketch as being a man that he showed some houses to in Laurel Canyon in the Hollywood Hills. They were looking at houses starting the week before Kristi went missing. The weekend she went missing was Valentine's Day weekend. That was the weekend Paul Katie showed Victor houses on February 14th, 16th, and 17th, not the 15th. Victor wasn't able to look at houses on the 15th, and that is the day that Kristi disappeared. He told the realtor that his name was Vincent Logus, and he had a company in New York called Logus, and he was expanding his company to California and needed a house in LA. He said he wanted a house in a quiet area with a price tag of $500,000 to $750,000. The first day that he was shown houses, there was an open house at a property that was on Skyline Drive where the road dead ended, and it was overlooking a ravine, and it was very, very secluded. Somehow, he got the combination to the lockbox, and they believe this is the house where Kristi was killed. Paul Katie said that when he would show Victor houses, Victor would go into another room, sometimes even into a closet, and ask Katie to talk to see if he could be heard in the next room. He would also go in a closet and scream and ask Katie if he could hear him screaming. And every time that Victor was out of the sight of the realtor, he stole things. He stole credit cards, driver's license money, all kinds of stuff. The police, they found Victor, and guess where he was? He was in jail. He was already in custody for trying to steal a BMW from a dealership. He goes to this dealership, and he has no ID, no paperwork, no credit card, no nothing to buy this car. And they told him, you can't buy the car. We need the paperwork and the documentation and everything for the credit and whatever. So he said, okay, well, then I'll have to come back another day. So he left. But somebody from, I guess, like the maintenance department or whatever had taken that BMW that he was interested in to gas it up. And so he drove up to the dealership as Victor was coming out, and he was like, are you the person that's taking this car? And he's like, oh, yeah, I am. He goes, okay, well, wait here just a minute. Let me go. I guess he had to go in and clear it with the manager or whatever. But he left the keys in the BMW. So Victor just got in the car and drove away. So that was in Beverly Hills. He was in jail in Beverly Hills, and then they found out that he had a residential address on La Cienega Boulevard. Detective Virginia Obenchain wrote a very detailed request for search warrants because she not only wanted to search his residence, she wanted to search every house that the realtor had shown him for signs of Kristi. Now, not necessarily like a whole, total search of everything in a house, just to go into the house to look to see if Kristi was in there or if there was any signs that she had been there. And after they found her body, the search warrants, they were amended to include that more thorough search that you would want to look for fingerprints, DNA, and all kinds of forensic evidence. But for starters, they just wanted to do a cursory search of the houses to see if there was any sign of her. When they executed the search warrant on his residence, the police found that it wasn't a residence at all. It was an empty restaurant. Now, this part confused the heck out of me. There are 2 restaurants, guys. 2 empty, being renovated restaurants. So, remember how Victor kind of just appeared by Susan? She was standing in front of this restaurant. And so he just walked out of the restaurant while she expected him to drive up in a car. So that's why it seemed to her like he just came out of nowhere. The restaurant on San Vicente was a restaurant that he was supposedly renovating for the owner. When he got out of jail, he went back to the owner asking for a place to stay. And Victor told him he had been in jail for financial crimes, but he didn't tell them about the other part, about the felony battery. So the owner let him stay at the restaurant. When the police talked to the owner, he said that at first it was fine, but now Victor was always bothering them when they were working in their office, referring to him and his son, because his son was the landlord of the property. So the police asked both of them if they knew that Victor had SA'd 2 women at the other restaurant on La Cienega. And the owner told him that Victor said something about bringing a girl there with the James Bond ruse, but it had nothing to do with sex. Why else would you do that kind of a ruse for, I don't know. He made it kind of seem like it was just like a robbery or something. That was in the first restaurant. At the restaurant on La Cienega, that was where he took his ex-girlfriend that he wanted to still be with and Heather Mayer. On the second floor of the restaurant, they found where Victor had been living, and he had a computer. They seized his computer, and they found pictures of women in black miniskirts, white shirts, nude nylons, and black stiletto heels. They also found driver's licenses, credit cards, fake IDs, and other things that could tie him to the burglaries of the houses, but there was still no sign of Kristi. The police had Victor transferred from Beverly Hills to Santa Monica. Now, Virginia Obenchain was the lead detective, and she had worked with Detective John Henry before, and she thought maybe he would open up more to a man than a woman. So she didn't go question him. She had Detective John Henry go. And Henry showed him a picture of Kristi, and Victor, almost didn't really look at it. He just, glanced at it, and he said he didn't know her. And the cop asked him to take a better look. Maybe he'd seen her in passing, but Victor still denied knowing her or ever seeing her. This part surprised me, because I didn't realize this. Miranda rights have to be read before a suspect can be questioned. That part I knew. If they ask for a lawyer, the interview must be stopped, unless there are exigent circumstances, which I did not know. And there was in this case. They needed to find Kristi. Victor was arrested for grand theft auto, not anything to do with Kristi. So Henry kept asking, and Victor kept denying. And then he would ask for a lawyer. So Henry kept telling him, "You're not here because of anything with her. We just want to know if you've seen her. You're not even arrested for that. You're arrested for grand theft auto. You don't need a lawyer for this. We just want to know if you've seen her." And he still kept denying it. So Detective Henry used a bluff. He told Victor that a witness had seen him talking to her at the mall, and the police only wanted to know what they talked about so they could find this woman. And he refused. He kept saying, "You're trying to trick me. You're trying to get me for this." And Henry said, "What is this? What are we trying to get you on? You were arrested for stealing a car. We just want to know if you've seen this woman." So he obviously knew that something bad had happened to this woman in order for him to say, "You're trying to pin this on me." So Virginia Obenchain, she arranged a live lineup to ID Victor as the man that they were looking for. And prior to the lineup, Obenchain had put together what they call a 6-pack, where it's a page with 3 on top, 3 on the bottom. And Victor was top right. And when Susan looked at it, Susan and Mark both looked at it, and they knew exactly. They ID'd Victor. They knew exactly who it was. The parking attendant at the hotel, however, picked the wrong man. So even though he picked the wrong man, they still brought him in for the live lineup. Obenchain noticed that Victor was growing a beard. So she thought, he's trying to make himself look different. So He asked them at the jail to shave him, and he refused to be shaved. So they got a court order so he would be clean shaven for the lineup. And just like in the photo lineups that they were shown, Susan and her boyfriend Mark were able to ID him, but once again, the parking garage attendant picked the wrong man. Victor told them that he had an alibi. He couldn't have seen her because he was at IHOP with a friend that night. And if you don't know what IHOP is, it is the International House of Pancakes, and it is my favorite place in the world to have breakfast. They have so many different kinds of pancakes, it's unreal. And crepes, and French toast, and... Okay, let's go back to the story. So the police questioned the friend about the alibi, and he said he didn't know Victor well at all. He knew him from the drugstore where he worked. They had only met in January, the previous month. He was supposed to meet Victor at IHOP at 11 p.m., but Victor didn't show up until after midnight. And the man noticed that Victor had 3 deep scratches above his eyebrow. Vincent told him that some furniture had fallen on him. How does furniture fall on you? I don't understand that explanation. The man said that Vincent had come up walking from the wrong direction, not the direction that he lived in, and he thought that was strange. Now the police think he was driving Kristi's car. Now the police think he was driving Kristi's car and that he parked it behind the restaurant so it couldn't be seen. So, like, you know, he wouldn't be seen pulling up in her car to the front of the restaurant. Then, after they were done eating, Victor asked him if he could spend the night at his house. And the man thought this was strange, but he said okay. So they took the bus to his house, and Vincent asked him to wake him up very early, around 4:30, no later than 4:30, because he wanted to go to Mass at 6:30. He got up at 4, had coffee with his friend, and then went to Mass. Only the cops checked, and there was no Mass at 6:30 a.m. at that church. And no one that worked there or went to that church recognized Victor. That was the morning that Kristi's car was left at the hotel's valet parking garage. The police had him on theft and had the testimony of the other women, but there was no connection to Kristi, other than the clothes that she bought. There was no way to prove he had done it. They hadn't even found her body yet. They had been constantly searching for Kristi's body until a series of storms flooded the area and they had to wait for the weather to clear up. After the storm subsided, 4 teenage boys were hiking in the hills when they thought they saw a mannequin. It's never a mannequin, guys. Never a mannequin. One of the boys went down, like, far enough. If this is a ravine, so it's not, you know, the hiking trail's over here. The ravine's over here. You know, it's not solid, safe ground to walk on. So he got as close to it as he could. And then he realized it was a dead body. So then the boys went up the street looking for help, and they saw a gardener in someone's yard. And they asked him if he had a phone, and he didn't. He didn't have a cell phone, and he didn't have access to the house. He was just the gardener. And then they saw a woman who was out walking her dog. So they asked her for help. She was able to maneuver herself down the ravine enough to see that it was a dead body in a blue sleeping bag with a gray hoodie over her head and shoulders. And she didn't have a phone. So then another woman, this is at a dead-end street, and it's secluded. I don't understand why so many people were in the area, but thank God they were. Then another woman came up to see what was going on, and they asked her to call the police, and she did. The police, paramedics, and rescue teams were called out, and they carefully placed her body in the body bag with what was left of the clothes she was wearing, a white button-down shirt, ripped and torn nylon stockings, and black stiletto heels. Now, the good thing about that is that her pantyhose were still on. They were ripped, but they were still on. If anybody did what he did, they would not put pantyhose back on. You guys know what I'm getting at? I don't want to say it, but he didn't get a chance to essay her. And she had on the black stiletto heels. It was impossible to ID her by her face. It had decomposed at a faster rate than the rest of her due to the weather conditions and the way she came to rest in the ravine. He dumped her and she slid and she hit her head on a tree stump. And perimortem wound is a wound that happens right before death. This meant she was still alive when he dumped her there. And she probably would have never been found if she hadn't fallen into the tree that caused the head injury that killed her. If she'd missed that tree stump and kept going down, she would have been way down in that ravine and they probably would have never found her. So this is a timeline of events as the cops have come to believe they happened. First, on February 15th, she was kind of bummed out. It was the day after Valentine's Day, and she had recently had a very bad breakup with her boyfriend, Todd. She was going to the mall to do some window shopping, hoping that it would cheer her up. There's nothing like retail therapy, man, let me tell you. I can be down in the dumps, get my phone, go to Amazon, boop, 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 buy something, even if it's like some little something, I don't know, and then I feel a little bit better. It is a real thing, you guys. I know you think I'm crazy, but it's a real thing. There she met Victor, and she bought the clothes that he asked her to wear to the audition. She went back home and showed the clothes to her roommate and Lucas and told them about the audition. Then she left for the meeting with Victor, but she couldn't find the house. So she called 411 for directions, and her phone pinged in Laurel Canyon, and that was the last phone call she ever made. And she still couldn't find it. So she pulled over and she asked somebody where the castle house was, and they gave her directions. So she found the castle house and she turned and followed the directions the rest of the way and finally found the house that was supposed to be where the audition was. Phone records put Victor there in Laurel Canyon, but they were having a hard time pinpointing the time of death. They even looked at insect activity, but the defense and prosecution couldn't agree on the time of death. There was an 8 to 24-hour window of time that she could have been killed in. His trial started in July of 2006. The jury consisted of 10 men and 2 women. Kristi's family was there for justice, as well as to help bolster the courage of the other women that were going to testify against him. They would give them thumbs up while they were on the witness stand for encouragement. I think that's nice. Before the trial reached its end, Victor once again pleaded guilty. The day of sentencing came, and the judge announced that he had received an 11-page letter from the defendant wanting to withdraw his guilty plea. The judge said that wasn't happening. He was sentenced to 25 years to life. His first parole hearing was scheduled for November of 2023, but he waived his right to have a parole hearing, which Kristi's family is extremely happy about. He will be eligible again in 2025, and he will be 61 years old. Kristi's dad calls the prison yearly to make sure that he's still locked up. Her family has put together a website called justiceforkristi.org. You can follow the case and parole hearings there, as well as see wonderful pictures and memories of Kristi. That was the murder of Kristi Johnson, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Have you guys ever been approached by an offer that seemed too good to be true? It does happen. When I was a little girl, I had a little pegboard and a little hammer, and I don't know why I like that thing so much, and I would sit there and I would just bang away at those pegs all day long. I loved it. And one day, my brother brought a greeting card home. He was in this store, just random store, and he saw a greeting card with my picture on it, playing with my pegboard. Someone had taken a picture of me through the window while I was playing with my pegboard and put it on a greeting card without my knowledge or my parents' knowledge. Man, that's scary. That's cringe. But I mean, nothing happened to me, but I could be famous right now. Like if the guy had just said, "Can we take a picture of your kid?" Although my mom would have said no, but so this is a sad one. Even more so that this guy could have been stopped before he was, but I'm glad he's finally behind bars. So that's it for this week, guys. Remember, be kind to people, love your family, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!